Hello, friends. Today we meet Deborah Hazlett, for whom acting is more than just a performance. It is part of a personal spiritual journey. Deborah talks with News Team about how her varied experiences on stage connect with a divine history within herself and the collective soul of the audience. Join us as we explore this interplay between art and spirit.
Deborah Hazlett, welcome to our podcast. We're thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So, Deborah, you are a professional actress. You've been part of the Everyman Theatre resident acting company for a couple of decades plus. You are a teacher of something that I don't know anything about called the Alexander Technique. We'd really love to hear about you, your career, and the Alexander Technique.
I've been at Everyman this is my 28th year. It's been pivotal for my development as an artist because a lot of people in this country, at least people I run into, don't know that being a regional theater actor, a full-time job. They know a lot about film and television actors and Broadway, but they don't know a lot about what we call being in the regions. I lived in New York for years and have had an agent there for years and have worked outside of Baltimore and had wonderful, wonderful experiences. But it's been so important to have an artistic home where I feel that I have a voice as an artist, where I feel my opinion and my journey is important to the folks around me who I consider my theater family. So it's been my artistic home now for a long time. And the gift of that is that I have some agency as an artist. I can talk about what's important to me. I work with people I consider my family, whether it's the stage managers, the shop, the crew, the wonderful administrative staff, the front of house folks. Often when you are hired and go to work in a theater, you just don't get to know those people. Everyone's kind, but you aren't exposed as an actor to those folks. So those people are my theater family. But I've also enjoyed auditioning in New York and working in theaters where I don't know anyone at all. Opportunity to start over and recreate yourself every time you go into a new rehearsal hall, where you may only have met the director in New York at an audition and a callback. Some of that is virtual these days since COVID. A lot of that has changed. And then there you are and you show up and you have an intense 8 to 10 weeks with folks, and then you go home. So the consistency of Everyman has really helped me develop myself as an artist in a place where I felt safe and welcomed. We talk at Everyman a lot about the rehearsal hall. I actually like rehearsal better than I like performance. In the rehearsal hall, you get to risk and fall down and make mistakes, and we try something, and then we say, oh, that didn't work. But then we get to try again. It's great fun. It's work, too. People still ask me after all these years, what do I actually do? The rehearsal week is 7 days a week, 8 to 10 hours a day. And then you have 8 shows a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday nights, 2 shows Saturday, 2 shows Sunday, sometimes a matinee during the week. So it's an intense process that requires a full-time job. And this is when you are working in a union house, which Everyman is. It's hard to have another kind of job when you're working, but you're not always working. So there's lots of in-betweens. And that's where I found my teaching to really sustain me. I have an NFA, which is a 3-year terminal program for actors. It's a funny word. It sounds like we die at the end of it, but you call it degree. It's the last one you can get as an actor. And that is what you need to teach at the university level. But also I teach for theaters when I work there. But during COVID, as you know, all the theaters shut down. Everything went dark. I had just started my teacher training for a certificate in the Alexander Technique. There happened to be AT Mid-Atlantic here in Baltimore, happened to be run by a brilliant woman, Nancy Romita. And we were able to keep that going. And it's a 1,600-hour certification. So I spent a lot of the 1.5 years of COVID where theaters were shut down, and then completed my training once we started working again. This time through studying it has really transformed my work, but also my life in a lot of ways. So it's been pretty spectacular.
Wow, well, we sure want to hear about that. I think it's probably a good time to just tell us a bit more about Alexander technique. And I do want to loop back to hear a bit more about your acting career and the impact that's had on your life, particularly on your inner self, your spiritual life. You were talking about that wonderful sense of family at Everyman that you've had, and which is awesome. I'm also interested in the audience component of that and the impact. I know you've been in a huge variety of roles. I've seen you in several very different roles. And so I don't know, you want to talk about Alexander or talk a little bit more about Everyman and what goes on there?
Let's talk about Everyman, just to keep a through line. So often in this business, you can be typecast when you don't know folks very well in New York. You're meeting a director, and they take one look at you, and they believe this is the type of role you can play. The gift of being a company member at Everyman is that that doesn't happen. So I've played everything from, I'm a pretty waspy-looking gal, right? The focus of my MFA was in the classics and Shakespeare. That is something I'm very passionate about. But at Everyman, I play everything from Ibsen to doing Frankie and Johnny at the Claire de Lune, to playing Tracy in Sweat, which was a very complicated, difficult play, beautiful play. I get to play in the classics in a way that I really love and that I'm very passionate about. The gift is that the artistic director, Vince Lancisi, who's just a terrific friend and a very talented man, he's the founding artistic director. So he started this theater more than 30 years ago, I think 35. He doesn't look at me and just see one thing. When you work with someone for this many years, they get to know how you can transform, and then they provide a space to make that happen. As an artist, it was my dream when I was in the 3rd grade, and my mom, we were on a trip my dad was stationed at Shaw Air Force Base. We took a family trip to Washington, D.C. We went to all the monuments. It was like last minute fourth row center tickets at Ford's Theater. We saw Godspell. It blew my mind. And I said to my mom, "How old are you in the 3rd grade?" I said, "That's what I'm doing." And she enrolled me in classes at the Sumter Little Theater, where I happened to be taught by Katie Dameron and Jan Taylor, brilliant, talented artists who had landed in Sumter, formed this theater. And I learned so much about the real work of a life as an actor. And I tried not to do it for a while. I worked for Congress for a while. I was going to go to law school, but I was afraid. So I got my MFA instead, and I graduated in 94 and have been working steadily since. My mom says, don't say you're lucky because it's hard work, but say grateful. I'm very grateful to have had the work that I've had and played the roles that I played.
Deborah, did you have a favorite role that you'd like to share with us?
People ask me that a lot. One of the gifts, too, of Everyman is the subscribers that are so involved. They see me do many different things. They see all of us do many different things. As a matter of fact, when I first came to the cathedral in 2016, there were a lot of subscribers there. And I remember being startled by that. It was lovely. They feel a bit like children, these roles, and it's hard to pick a favorite. I've had roles that had changed me. So I had a gobbler. It's an Ibsen play. She's a complicated woman. She's trapped and she's a complicated woman, but she does this thing in the middle of the play where this manuscript that this person's been working on forever, and it's a play that takes place a long time ago, so it was a handwritten manuscript. There would have only been one of them. She burns it. She throws it in the oven and burns it. Somebody in the audience literally stood up and said, "You're a psycho." So that kind of relationship with the audience is something that you only get in live theater. Hedda was important to me. She was a very difficult character. But I always make the argument that I can't judge these people. I have to love these people, because when people are behaving badly, they rarely think they're behaving badly. That's just not how it works. So I don't think these are bad people. I can't, as I'm playing the role. I have to find what motivates them and why they do what they do. Sometimes the more difficult characters, the more challenging it is, the more satisfying it may be. But then I recently did A Midsummer Night's Dream, which was nothing but delightful the whole time. And then I said, I'm never doing another drama again. I only do comedies.
Yeah.
It was fun and playful, and I love the language. People often say to me, how do you play these intense roles and not let it affect your life? Well, it does affect your life. I always say, I'd come off stage, All My Sons, for example, beautiful play, and the man who plays my husband commits suicide at the end. That's the last scene. There's a gunshot, and that's it. Death of a Salesman, where Willie kills himself in the car at the end, right? So I always say, you go off stage, you have the curtain call, and you go to the dressing room, and you take your wig off, but your body has taken a physical, emotional journey. It's real important to have the tools and skills to manage that in a way that enhances your life. Thank God my life is not as dramatic all the time as my characters' lives. We all have times in our lives where it's terribly dramatic, either terribly difficult or very joyful. Not 8 shows a week. So it's very important to learn the discipline of releasing what the journey has been, if that makes sense.
It does. It's making me think about how these roles and have affected you personally is the impact that it must have and does have on audience members. We all need the experience of joy that you were talking about with Midsummer. And we need to be thoughtful and provoked, as watching Hedda Gabler would certainly make people think. It was written a long time ago, but the themes are so timeless and current.
The theme of a woman feeling trapped in a marriage and in a system where she doesn't have agency and she is expected to behave and live a life based on the expectations mostly of men. In Hedda Gabler, Ibsen writes about this with Nora in A Doll's House, with Mrs. Alving in Ghosts. The themes resonate. People, whether you're a man or a woman, the feeling of not having agency in your own life is something that people can recognize. The catharsis between anyone on stage and the audience is the reason I do the work. The audience is another character in the play. We feel you breathe, we hear you laugh. We can tell if you're bored. We can tell if we're just not funny that night. Sometimes we're just not funny. It's tremendous, that sort of connectivity. I always tell people, if you go to a movie theater and there's nobody in the movie theater, you're always really happy because oh, good, I can just watch the movie. If you go into a live performance theater and there's nobody there, it's very disconcerting. People want to have that communal experience. It's like being at church. When the church is full and you can just feel all that connectivity and shared experience, it's the same way in the theater. So I don't think AI can ever replace that.
Deborah, after speaking, the connection, the joy that you share, how has this experience of acting and interacting with the audience, how has that helped your spirit, or how has that affected your spiritual life?
I was away from church for a long time. I was raised in the Episcopal Church. My grandpa was an Episcopal bishop. Like many folks in my late 20s, I moved away from the church. I struggled with some of the concepts, and I found real spirituality in the theater. It feels similar, the shared experience, but also the mystery of the transformation that happens in the room is something that I can't explain to anyone, but I know it. When I am in church, I often have the same experience of what is actually, in my mind, the Holy Spirit, just the work of the Holy Spirit in the room. And I have a little prayer I say before I go on stage every night, and I invite the Holy Spirit to travel with me to help me be a vessel for truth. That's a phrase I got from a dear friend of mine. As to how it helps my continued work on my own connectivity to God and my own spirituality, It's a strong reminder of staying present and listening and staying open to what is before you. As an actor, you have to listen, pay attention to the beauty and the miracles that are happening all around you, the courage of the people around you to do what they do. I think more than anything, it's helped me to be open to what's possible. And when I came back to church in 2016, I found out that Rob was an ex-musical theater actor from New York. I'm like, oh, I found my place, I found my home. I feel very grateful to organize the Readers Ministry and do those trainings because I hope I can bring some of these gifts to that ministry and invite other people to use themselves to tell the story, even in a shorter way, bringing who you are as a reader to tell the story, because that's what's important. It's important because you're the person telling the story. So it's been a real gift for me to integrate that. I hope that was clear.
It absolutely was. It's great to see that integration. I just find this whole discussion so irresistible. I do want to get to Alexander technique, honest, but I do want
We can do another one about AT.
this might be long enough to split into two, right, Lauren? The thing I'm thinking about, the theater, Everyman in particular, I'm so grateful that it survived COVID because that certainly killed a lot of art and live performance venues and so on. These days, the theater and all arts are really under additional threats in terms of funding and so on. And I assume that Everyman Theatre is being affected by all that. And I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I certainly want to let our viewers and listeners know how they can be supportive of the work that Everyman's doing and that you and your actor colleagues are doing.
Go to the theater, buy a ticket. People have stopped. It really took a hit during COVID. And for some reason, I don't know if people just want to stay home and watch TV at night because they came to know what that feels like. But the only way we can tell the story is if there are people in the theater to tell the story too. And the ticket sales they're so important to keeping theaters alive, but you'd be surprised at what a small portion it is of the actual money that keeps the theaters going. Resources right now are not as available as they have been in the past for all kinds of complicated reasons. So go to the theater, bring a friend to the theater. The other thing is, one of the nice things about the subscription model is that you can pick the plays you want to go to. This subscription model is great because you're not going to like every play that you see, but you're going to learn something. And my favorite theater goers and subscribers are people that go to see a new play. Maybe they don't like it, but there's something about it that touched them or moved them, or we can talk about it afterwards, like every play I'm in. But taking the risk on a new play, exposing yourself to something unexpected, we actually talk in the Alexander technique, although it's not only from the Alexander technique, is coming with a beginner's mind so that whatever is in front of you, you're able to stay open to and see what you can discover. I say to people, go to the theater, go to Everyman, subscribe to Everyman. But there's a wonderful community theater in this city, the DIY theaters of these young artists that are doing extraordinary work. So just leave home, go to the theater at Everyman, for example, and this is a national trend. We've moved the evening curtains from 7 to 8 and the matinees on Saturdays and Sundays from 2 to 1. Now, people like the 7 o'clock, but they like the 2 o'clock. But the union has a rule that there has to be a certain amount of time between shows so the actors can eat and rest. So if we're going to move it to 7, we can't do the 2 o'clock. 7 o'clock, and you can be home and in bed by 9:30 if you want to be. Lots of theaters are doing that because people just don't stay out like they used to. I have a friend who runs a restaurant. They're dealing with the same thing. People don't go out to eat at 10 o'clock anymore. So go to the theater, take classes. There's a wonderful education department at Everyman. I just taught a new class for the Alexander technique and actors. I'm still so excited about it because I was working on this particular syllabus and curriculum to see if I could integrate these two passions in a way that would help expand what's possible for the actors in the class and their agency around their performances, how they can use their bodies to tell the story they want to tell. And after 6 weeks with this glorious group of students, worked. It was so exciting. Most theaters have an education component. We have summer classes all summer for young kids to get them interested in theater. The education department is a great way to help support how we bring money into the theater. You can just go online and donate if you want to.
Great.
We're going to stay alive if audiences don't go. That we know for sure. That we learned during COVID. We knew it anyway.
Yeah. So, Deborah, we will have the Everyman website in our show notes so people can find it easily and buy tickets, subscribe, look at the educational offerings. I'm sure there's a donate button on that site. And I know, Lauren, you're just itching to ask about Alexander technique, so I'll be quiet. It's been a teaser. It's come in like 4 times already. And you always good.
I have. And Deborah, I'm like John, I don't know much about it. I had a friend who did practice it, but tell us what Alexander technique is and how you use it in your own life.
It's basically a re-education process for change, but for the body, right? A lot of people know about mindfulness these days. A lot of us meditate, and AT is mindfulness for the body because we often leave our bodies out of that mindfulness journey. And we study it as actors. It was developed by a man named Frederick Matthias Alexander. He, in the late 1800s into the early 1900s, he was an Australian actor in a time where the performance style was very declarative. They would come down to the edge of the stage and sort of declare. He found he kept losing his voice, and he was an actor in demand, but he would lose his voice all the time. So he finally quit for a year. He studied himself in the mirror and found that he didn't lose his voice in life, but every time he would perform, he would throw his head back and expand his chest. He was putting so much compression in the back of his neck and on his vocal cords that he would lose his voice. So he came to discover the importance of the head-neck-spine relationship in performance. We study it as actors because we have to do 8 shows a week without losing our voices. It's become practice for the whole body, and its basic idea is that it helps through. We say it's not a do, it's a think. It's a gentle practice of non-judgmental noticing of habituated physical response to stimulus, developing your sensory awareness so that you are noticing physical habit and learning to inhibit that habituated response. In that moment of pause is where you have the agency to direct. And that's where you direct yourself in the way that you would like to respond so that you are in your best use. We talk about the means whereby we do something. We forget that part. The means whereby we get from the first floor to the second floor. At my age anyway, I shouldn't be doing anything else on the stairs except thinking about being on the stairs. But we're so busy with all these other things that we make mistakes, we trip. And so it's an example of the being mindful of the means whereby we move through life. And it can help enormously with habituated patterns of tension, back trouble. For me, my jaw, I think I have to clench my jaw to pick up a pen. I think I have to clench my jaw to pull a coffee cup off the cupboard shelf. So it's about identifying where you habituate tension and holding through a hands-on somatic practice. I work with a massage table with clients and help people learn to create and maintain ease in the body. The biggest thing that I have found in my work is that component of inhibition, the pause that allows for choice, the pause that allows for change. It turns into a thought that affects not just your body, but also your emotional state. If you allow yourself to pause, then I can be much more open to what is coming. Because my instrument is very fluttery. And unless I'm in a wig and a costume, I can get quite nervous and uncomfortable. And then I talk really fast and I get distracted and I don't finish sentences. And AT has helped me. It's slow, change is slow, but it's helping me just learn to go through my basic AT directions and to find ease. The basic Alexander, the directions that he came up with were free the neck to allow the spine to lengthen, to allow the torso to widen. Directions for the body that create ease. The head-neck spine relationship, this is really cool. Do you have an idea of where your head actually meets your spine? If you do, put your hand where you think your head attaches to the top of your spine. I can't see John, but Lauren is here. It actually attaches to the spine at the Atlantic occipital joint. Don't have to worry about that. But if you put your fingers like you're going to plug your ears and you nod here, that's how high up. That is where the skull sits at the top of the spine, almost like a mortar and pestle. So we think that we have to involve we compress the backs of our necks like this. That is 60 pounds of pressure on the spine when you tilt your head like this and look at your phone. So the head-neck spine relationship is really about learning to get that head to sit on the spine in a way that creates space. And when we say free the neck, it's releasing all those muscles in the neck that allow the spine to lengthen and the torso to widen. That is basically what it's about. And then there's many other things that we learn, but it's an approach that for me has invited change in my body that has been I haven't thrown my back out since I finished my studying. It's great for chronic pain because you identify the use of your body that is maybe contributing to that chronic pain. It's a teacher-student model because I'm not a medical practitioner and we don't pretend to be, so we call it a lesson, which I think is really important because I can help a lot with use. There's structural injury that a doctor would have to deal with, but teachers can usually help because there's a release of muscle that can happen with this work that might give you some help around a structural injury as well, but we don't pretend to be medical practitioners. It's sort of it in a nutshell, but it's so much cooler than that. Nutshell.
It sounds very intriguing and promising, like it really could be helpful. Now, you mentioned you've been teaching this in classes to actors, but you also have one-on-one instruction. How do people find out about that?
So far, people are finding me through the theater at Everyman, but they are not responsible for that's if you want coaching or want to take a class at Everyman. I'm in the process of getting a website up and running so people would find me through my name. But right now, Everyman does not have anything to do with scheduling my private work. But for coaching for audition and things like that, we go through the education department there.
So what I'd say is when you get your website, let us know, and we will attach that to this podcast as well. Lauren, did you have any other questions for Deborah about or anything else?
Deborah, yes. I mean, you have shared so much with us today. Your joy and passion for acting and finding the mystery, the divine mystery in acting as well as in church, and how it has enhanced your spiritual life. And you just shared with us how the Alexander technique can help us in body, mind, and spirit. What other advice would you like to share with those who are watching and listening now?
It's an interesting time in my life to be getting older in this business and to coming out of COVID, getting older, and the Alexander technique. All of those things have helped me develop an agency for myself in how I want to experience this next part of my life. As actors, we often feel we don't have any agency. We audition for a director, we don't get to pick the plays, but we do have agency about what we say yes to and what we say no to, about how we are in the room, about how we treat our colleagues. And this is really interesting to me, Lauren. I've been thinking so much lately about the intersection of my spiritual life and my AT work and my acting work. I think that we can all find agency in ways that we possibly haven't thought possible. And it all just has to do with how we choose to be in community and how we choose to respond with hopefully grace and kindness and a beginner's mind. We don't have to think we know everything. We know the things we know, but there's so much else out there. And at a time where people are really not listening very well, I think that if we just take a pause and allow for breath and let go of the holding and the fear and the tension so that we can stay present, then maybe we can help affect change and create a loving community. So I'm still working on this intersection. I've been thinking a lot about it because I'm experiencing it in two pretty profound places in my life, the church and the theater. I don't know if that's advice, but that's what I'm thinking about.
It sounded like great advice to me, Deborah. So, Deborah Hazlett, thank you so much for being with us on our podcast. We have enjoyed spending this time with you, your wisdom, your presence. Thanks.
Well, I am delighted to be with both of you, and I'm sure I'll see you soon.
John and I want to thank all who are watching and listening for the gift of your time with us today. Until next time, peace and blessings.
This episode of Good News has been brought to you by Listening for Clues. For more podcasts, check out our YouTube channel or our website listeningforclues.com.